Welcome to Kepler Conversations. I'm Dr. Scott Postman. Kepler is an online marketplace for classical Christian education. We employ the historic university model and leverage the best available technology so that we can empower families by liberating teachers to make a classical liberal arts education available, accessible, and affordable. Today, I'm joined by Kepler teacher Dr. Barbara Helmkamp. Dr. Helmkamp earned her Ph.D. In physics from Louisiana State University and an engineering degree in physics from Colorado School of Mines. She worked in petroleum engineering as a petrophysicist for the Shell companies in New Orleans, where she met her husband, Bob. But being home with and for her children won out over working full time. Nowadays, she prefers teaching online for classical Christian high schools and colleges, including here at Kepler Education. Welcome, Dr. Helmkamp.
Welcome, and thank you.
Well, we're super glad to have you. And as we get started, what I like to ask our teachers, first of all, is to find out a little bit about you beyond the classroom. So maybe talk for just a moment, if you wouldn't mind, about yourself in terms of what you like to do outside of the classroom. What are you passionate about, hobbies, those kinds of things. We'd just love to hear a little bit about you.
Sure. So I'm a Coloradan, born here. I love the mountains. So everything mountainous is wonderful. I love to snow ski and backpack and kayak and fish and the whole bit. So my husband and I enjoy those activities. We did with our daughters, but now they're grown and living in other states. It's sad for them. And then otherwise, I'm involved musically at our church. I'm the organist at it's a tiny congregation in Elizabeth, Colorado, Christ Our Savior Lutheran Church. We're real active there. My husband's the congregational president, and I direct our choir. We're so small, I should call it a quintet. I think instead of a choir, but music is a passion, classical music. There's a wonderful organization here, Colorado Bach Ensemble, that works its way through performing all of Bach's many cantatas, and we support and enjoy those concerts as well as the great Passion of St. Matthew, Passion of St. John that are routinely performed by Colorado Bach Ensemble. So music is a passion. I miss my daughters in that regard very much. Both are violinists, and it's very sad to not have that violin playing in the home. But they're still playing. Someone is hearing it. So
that's a blessing. I completely can relate to that with our kids growing up. Our daughters and son, he played percussion, but they played violin and piano, and so when they got married and moved out of the house, went to college, you kind of lose having that all around all the time. So yeah. I completely relate. Well, you told us a little bit, or at least in your bio, we learned a little bit about your formal education and higher education. But, a lot of us, or perhaps like a lot of us, I didn't grow up receiving a classical education. And it wasn't until later on I discovered what classical education was and realized I need to get a better education. But I'd love to hear from our own teachers, your journey into classical education or your experience with it. Did you have a classical education growing up? Was that normal for you, or was that something you discovered later on? Maybe just tell us a little bit about that, end of your education.
Sure. So my parents were both public school teachers, French, and for my father and mother, and then she switched to library science. So I was educated in the public schools, though they had thought at one point of pulling me, my brother, and I into Christian schools when busing commenced in the Denver area, which is where I grew up. So, but I would say, so my education wasn't classical, certainly, though it was a good education still. But I think in the time, my mother's era, I would say her education very much was classical, including, I always knew she loved Latin, and she was well read in the classics, and languages were a love for both my parents. My father was also a ordained pastor, was in the ministry for a time, went to Grace Seminary, and then decided that education was where he belonged. But in any case, the love of the scriptures, so the Christian education came from within the home as opposed to within the schools, because I was in the public schools. But I think I always sort of coveted the education my mother had. But, you do what you do, and going on, it wasn't until, we had children of our own and having to make that big decision about education. There was no question that we wanted our girls in Christian schools. They were in Lutheran schools, parochial schools from K through 8. But then it peters out. There are some Lutheran high schools around. By then, I'd had enough exposure to the uniqueness or value of a more classical education, emphasis on reading many great books and logic, rhetoric, the whole thing. And so when we set about looking into it, I quested what homeschooling might look like with support for the humanities. And we decided to go that way. And our daughters both being violinists, it was also, we were mindful of how public high schools or high schools in general will take over your life, and there's no more time left for the study of the instrument. And whereas you can carve more time out for practicing. So it was a combination of factors. And we just jumped into that, that sphere of online homeschool, classical Christian education, such as it was. And my mother was the key in the story to segue our girls into Latin. So she took them on in the home. It was wonderful just to have grandma teaching our girls their first year of Latin. And she taught them so rigorously that then when they stepped into Latin 2 online, it was a piece of cake. So that was great. But that's sort of how we ended up here. Along the way, the project physics material as a course that was developed in the 60s and 70s. I was made aware of it just through some helpful fellow homeschooling parent whose sons went to engineering. And so I was interested in how does that look, what does that look like if you join the homeschool world? Can you still equip your students to enter colleges? And the whole question. And I was kind of overwhelmed by that book. And so the one that I use for the courses I teach here with Kepler, our girls had to read cover to cover across their year of chemistry and physics, which they took all the sciences from me. So that was
fantastic. Then they got a fabulous degree or fabulous education in the sciences for sure, huh?
Yeah, I hope so. I think so.
Well, can you talk a little bit about you mentioned in your biography, you teaching in various applications, colleges and high schools. But can you talk a little bit about your Kepler experience or what brought you to Kepler? And is there anything unique in that experience that sets it apart for you? And I'm not really fishing for anything. I'm just curious to hear kind of, your thoughts on Kepler and how you arrived here.
Right. Well, so I was having a hard time finding someone willing to let me teach a classical physics course. There seems to be a willingness to have a unique or classical approach in the humanities, but when it comes to the sciences, for some reason, there's this need to, do straight up the way it's always been done, sort of thing. And so I had been with another online school for a number of years, one our girls had been involved with. It was even before Kepler existed, but I was not having fun anymore because I wanted to teach project physics and couldn't persuade them to let me. So my husband, Bob, saw an ad in World Magazine for Kepler, and that's what prompted me to call you. And then I have been delighted to find that I have the freedom to set this course up and to teach it. You helped me think through what would be a valuable addition with some astronomy in the Project Physics 1 course, so that meets one of Kepler's requirements for a diploma if the student takes my Project Physics with astronomy. So that was how I ended up with Kepler, and it's the time zone's a little better for me than when I was with a school out of the East Coast, and so there was a bigger time difference than with out of Moscow, Idaho. So
That's wonderful. Well, I'm glad to know that those ads in World Magazine paid off. But, you never know. You never know where you reach and where you get to connect with people. So I don't think I'd heard that story before. But I definitely appreciate. I still remember our conversation. That you wanted to teach physics classically, and this has been a conversation. And I think you described it very well. In the classical renewal, there's so many people interested in humanities. I'm a humanities guy myself, but part of the reason we called the platform, for a long time when we were thinking about it, we called it the network. What do we call it? But Kepler came to mind because of that association, that classical mindset in the direction of the sciences. How does the natural philosophy shore up with the rest of philosophy? And so having you present that, like, here's something I wanted to teach, was refreshing, and it was outstanding. So could you maybe talk a little bit about that class? I know you've got a few classes on the Kepler platform, and I'd love for you to expand on all of them. Maybe start with the project physics and astronomy, because I think that's so important, and it's a class that I think is fundamental to a high school education, for a student, particularly a student that's college bound. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your approach and what that course, entails.
sure. So the project physics course, which is all an archive for students to read without purchasing a book, though they can quest the book, paper version of it, and get them pretty reasonably if that's desired. But anyway, it consists of 6 units, and it's was designed as a full year of natural philosophy or science for a liberal arts major at a place like Harvard. So it's a first year of college sort of course. It's an enormous amount of material for 1 year, and it translates into a high school environment better to split it into 2 parts. And so project physics with astronomy is like project physics 1, the first 3 of the 6 units. And then the project physics 2, which is like project physics with chemistry, is the latter 3. The unique thing about one of the unique things or special things about the project physics course is its emphasis on historical context for the development of science in Western civilization. So, and astronomy is a big part of that, because it was hard without modern timing devices to monitor motion in order to describe it accurately. That came later with the scientific revolution and the 1600s, 1500s, so forth. But prior to that, motions in the heavens by comparison are slow. So you can monitor them, you can follow them. Each night is like, a snapshot in a strobed sequence, and that you can figure things out. So that's one reason, practically speaking, that astronomy was essential to the whole groundwork of the development and understanding of the sciences, physical sciences. So the project physics course places a big, fat, beautiful unit on astronomy as its second of the 3 units that comprise what I call project physics 1 with astronomy. And then, so each unit gets a quarter. It starts with basic understanding of concepts of motion, of speed and acceleration, and Newton's laws. That's the first unit. Then astronomy and Newton's universal law of gravitation, and so forth. And then the third unit brings in what's called kinetics, or energy ideas and momentum. But before we get to that, in the fourth quarter, I put in a unit on observational astronomy. And I credit my daughter, or both of them, for the book I used for that, which is Dr. Jason Lyle's Stargazer's Guide to the Night Sky. And it's a beautiful book filled with photographs from mainly the Hubble, but now we also have the James Webb Space Telescope. And so we acquire in that quarter observational astronomy and the working vocabulary to talk astronomy and where the stuff is in the sky and the various the geometry that goes along with that gets embedded. So we see integration of the math with the physics happening naturally there, for one, and elsewhere also. So that's the Project Physics 1 with astronomy, or Project Physics with astronomy course. 3 units from Project Physics, and an extra unit on observational astronomy, sort of after that beautiful unit on historical astronomy, if you will, and tying into Newton's contributions also. And some of the experiments we do are to repeat the original experiment to estimate the size of the Earth. That was, anyway, I have students who are far enough apart, north and south from each other, that they can go out and look at the location of the sun at their local noon and compare with each other, and then estimate the size of the Earth, for one. That's one of my favorite experiments. So that's so that there you have my description of Project Physics with astronomy.
That's beautiful. I love the way you're not only have integrated all that, but I love your enthusiasm and your passion for the subject. I think this is something that is sometimes missing, when we have, in the modern education, we've divided humanities in STEM, and we focus on it that way. And we sort of lose that integrated life experience of the actual practical application of these things. So I have a really quick, just fun question to ask you before we talk about Project Physics 2, because I want to talk about that a little bit. But this is just more of a prompt that I'm asking it playfully, but I just want to hear your answer to it. So it's the question people always ask me: is physics math, or is it science?
Math is the language of physics.
Fantastic. All right, perfect.
Calculus, especially calculus.
Change, right? Calculus, yeah, the study of change. Beautifully done. I always provoke. You get math and science people, and they're talking, and and everybody's pulling for their department. But I like to do that for fun. What about Project Physics 2? You mentioned some chemistry in there. Can you talk about that a little bit, and who should take that course?
So it would be accessible to any student who has had physics, like a full, proper high school physics course, because they would be able to step into Project Physics 2 without having taken my Project Physics 1. But so far, I've only had one, only taught it 1 year now. I only am getting takers from my Project Physics 1 course who happen to take it as young enough, as a junior, so they could fit it in. So its 3 units are light and electromagnetism, and then the atom, and then the nucleus. So really 2/3 of it is what will generally fall under the category of chemistry for high school students. Okay. Especially, well, both nuclear chemistry, it would be called, and atomic chemistry. It begins with light and electromagnetism. That is usually part of a first-year physics course instead of the astronomy, you see. So that's a displacement. In order to have astronomy in the first year, then the light and electromagnetism gets in the second year. But you introduce light a little bit even in that last unit of Project Physics 1 because of the study of waves, and light has some wave-like behavior and some particle-like behavior. So I always say it's neither wave nor particle. But light is how we observe things. Light is how we do astronomy. So it's, and I find myself talking astronomy a lot again in Project Physics 2 because of light and its significance and observation. So let's see, there's so much chemistry already there in the course as it's laid out that my extra unit, I kind of disperse it between quarters instead of having it as a single quarter like astronomy was. But I bring in enough of what would be in a chemistry course to confer half a year of chemistry on top of the year of physics. So just like with Project Physics 1 with astronomy, I didn't mention this, but you get the year of physics and then a half year of astronomy in addition. So it's 1.5 credits of the physical science, 1 as physics, half as astronomy. And then for Project Physics 2, it's 1 as physics and half as chemistry. So a student could take a local chem lab to confer that other half credit. And I think it would be very legitimate to call that chemistry, high school chemistry. The half credit from me, and then so I don't know that the word is out on that, but I'd like it to be, because maybe some students would jump in and I'd have more than, the handful of, less than a handful of non-graduating students to come back and take it. So.
Well, you heard it here first on Kepler Conversations, that half a credit of chemistry in addition to that credit of physics. Well, and your approach, I really love the way that you're integrating. I mean, all of these things are such an integrated, view of the world that we live in, the cosmos. But being able to integrate that, it gives great value to the course in terms of the students, what they're purchasing and what they're getting, versus taking a full chemistry or a full astronomy. So there's a lot of value in these courses, and not just from a price point, but a lot of value from the integration aspect for their overall education. So I'm excited about these. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about or mention as we're wrapping up in our conversation? Anything you'd like to leave our audience with before we go? Because I really enjoyed this and wish we had another half hour to unpack questions I have. But maybe you have one final thought to leave us with.
Well, the final thought would be that the Project Physics material is secular. And while it's more fair than a lot of material out there, the essentially atheistic worldview pokes in here and there, and I make it very much part of the course to tackle that when it shows up, and to discuss it, and to bring to bear apologetics for creation as merited. And so along those lines, there's a very serious misconception about the physics of light itself, that it's almost the unifying theme for both courses, for the entire course, in my mind, is to have out there a right understanding of light. Primarily, and I'll end with this, that the universe is not old just because it is big. And there's abundant reason from from general relativity and Einstein himself that requires us not to make that assumption about light and its speed and so forth. That bigness does not mean old. The light coming from that star billions of light years away does not have to be billions of years old by any means. So that's my teaser.
I absolutely love it. So a fabulous Christian apologetic as part of physics, chemistry, astronomy. Dr. Helmkamp, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today and have this conversation. To our audience, you'll find all of Dr. Helmkamp's courses in our show notes, so you'll be able to find those and take a look at our courses. Hope you come by Kepler.education and sign up there. God bless you. Thank you, Dr. Helmkamp. Bye-bye, everybody.
You're welcome.